I therefore propose to enhance the surcharge on individuals having taxable income from 2 crore to 5 crores and 5 crore and above. Government has already moved the GST Council to lower the GST rate on electric vehicles from 12 to 5%, setting an enhanced target of rupees 1,05,000 crore of disinvestment receipts for the financial year 2019-20. I'm proposing to return the regulation authority over the housing finance sector from NHB to the RBI.
The curtains are rising on the big sequel to the franchise called Bahi Khata. It's the production of the Government of India, written and directed by Nirmala Sitharaman. She plays the lead and she's supported by a slew of actors, and that includes Anurag Thakur and, of course, a slew of officials from the Finance Ministry who've had their blinkers on. They've single-mindedly been cooped up in North Block to finish this magnum opus, the sequel to Bahi Khata 1. We're calling it Bahi Khata 2, The Budget Returns. And that's what we're here to watch. I'm about to get my big tub of popcorn, and I suggest you do that too, because this curtain raiser comes with its own filmy tadka. But before we get down to it, let's do a bit of a rewind. Like any film, the critics had their own takes on the first installment of this franchise called Bahi Khata. Don't be surprised if this reminds you of that 1966 spaghetti western, The Good, the Bad and the Ugly. First, the good. Industry veteran Ajay Piramal had said that Nirmala Sitharaman's first production had a long-term vision. He called her attempt to reach a global audience to raise sovereign debt as a vote of confidence in the economy. Then there was the bad from Aditi Nair of ICRA, and she sounded pretty skeptical about Nirmala ji achieving her fiscal deficit target, which incidentally is playing the big role in the plot of the sequel Bahi Khata 2. And among the set of reviews, there was the ugly as well, which came from our consulting editor and one of the most lauded critics in the industry, Swaminathan Iyer. He said there were no bold steps and no visionary things. And here we are about to witness the show, and it begins anytime now. So while Nirmala Sitharaman's first outing as the director of Bahi Khata 1 got some serious flack, she took all the necessary steps midway between Bahi Khata 1 and 2 to iron out certain issues that plague the economy. So like the movies in the past that never came in a bound script before it hit the floors, there was a lot of scripting, and all of it took place on the sets.
July 5th, 2019, the FM's first ever production, Bahi Khata, plays out for the first time.
Public sector banks are now proposed to be further provided 70,000 crores.
While her dialogue delivery you couldn't fault, the actual delivery on the pronouncements didn't quite hit that sweet spot. But like a protagonist in a movie who seeks redemption, the action sequences actually followed all these dialogues. 23rd August, big day, a slew of policy changes kicked in. Just like Anil Kapoor in the film Nayak, Nirmala came hurtling down on everything that needed change with her battery of character actors, all the officials of the Finance Ministry. And in the bag of goodies that Nirmala distributed, just like a modern-day Robin Hood would, there was something for everyone. A rollback of the super-rich tax, an exemption from angel tax for startups. She lent a helping hand to the ailing auto sector as well.
The enhanced surcharge on FPI goes, in simple words, to mitigate genuine difficulties of startups and their investors. It has been decided that Section 56(2)(b) of the Income Tax Act shall not be applicable to a startup registered with DPIIT.
But did it bring a smile to cars? Not quite. And then the character of Robin Hood morphed into that of Leonardo DiCaprio's Wolf of Wall Street. She had something more in store, an infusion of 70,000 crore rupees into public sector banks. And it didn't stop there. On the 30th of August, Nirmala announced the rise of the Big Four. 10 public sector banks were amalgamated into 4 big banks. and there was an upfront capital infusion of 55,250 crores in the PSBs. We're sure the public sector banks must have felt like Tobey Maguire from The Great Gatsby, who got his house refurnished. But did she stop there? That would be a big no. On the 20th of September, like an attempt for a clean sweep of the Oscars, the Finance Minister Nirmala comes up with not the biggest movie, but surely the biggest move of the year. She slashes corporate tax, and thus she ticks all the boxes for her various audiences. India Inc. happy, markets happy, industry bodies happy enough for a standing ovation. And just like a hero comes along and turns everything right, our own Captain Marvel was winning minds, if not hearts. Experts started lauding her moves.
I think the most impressive part was the commitment which the finance minister has to sorting out the problems of all sectors of the economy.
Here we have a finance minister who is listening to the market.
And some critics started to change their minds about her superpowers. But then, this is cinema. What's a story without a twist in the tail? A villain drops in with a bunch of comrades. And just like Loki in Avengers, the first one to attack Nirmala is consumption. The long-time buddy of the Indian economy has turned against the economy now. IIP plunges to an all-time low, exports start faltering, and people decide not to spend. At the box office or even anywhere else. So much so that the FM ends up trolling herself by saying that millennials are the real reason for the auto slowdown.
The automobile sector in particular and the components together have been affected by several things, inclusive of the BS6 movement, inclusive of that registration fee related matter, which we have deferred till June, inclusive of the mindset. Some studies do tell us the mindsets of the millennials who are now preferring not to commit an EMI towards buying an automobile, instead would prefer to have Ola and Uber and everything else, or take the metro.
And then comes the other villain, inflation. Now, haven't we all seen the Mummy series? This monster that had been kept in control for ages rears its ugly head. At the precise moment that we thought we'd lost sight of it, it attacks, and it attacks venomously. At 7.35%, we cry as much as we do when we chop onions at that rate. But wait, where are the onions? Oops, they've been too expensive to buy. And like all the conspirators in a Balaji film, the situation starts to change dramatically. Experts start pointing fingers at the government. The opposition launches one surgical strike after another. The ratings agencies downgrade their India GDP projections as well. So much so that it prompts the FM to come out and say on the 21st of December, I want industry to stop doubting themselves. So where are we now? Our protagonist is in a catch-22. Spend, spend, spend to save the economy. लेकिन अपना बही खाता नहीं है बड़ा. Our problem is still प्याज, कपड़ा, मकान.
Yep, that's the kind of scripting we've seen on the sets this time, and some of it can bring a few tears to your eyes. But yes, there's the Thanos of all problems, the fiscal deficit like we were telling you. Now that's something the star and director of our film, Nirmala Sitharaman, is going to be up in arms against. Will she fight it? Will she defend it? It's that part of a filmy conflict that spurs the story ahead. It gives you all the emotions of happiness, of sadness, there's anger, the works. So will Nirmala get the help of the Infinity Stones to help her out of this conundrum? Or is the situation already too grim to save? Before we get into that debate, let's take a look at what could be as much of a thriller as that 90s film, Ek Villain. Yeah, remember that? We have Ek Villain in the Fisk this time.
Hundreds of years ago, a parampara, pratishthan and anushasan started. Surya Vansham. And it played so much that its memes ruled the roost for a long, long time. Just like that, the term that is looked out for in every budget since the Dark Ages is fiscal deficit. The explanation is simple. The government borrows money to invest in social sectors, into manufacturing, into infrastructure, in what helps the economy, and returns it all with interest. Now, if a government follows this to the T and and make sure that the debt is serviced and more investments are flowing, then well done. Aap agle guru ho. But if the debt starts spiraling out of control, then it is amdani athanni, kharcha rupaiya. The debt that the government takes on is called fiscal deficit. Now, the government, over a period of time, decided to follow a sustainable path of reducing its fiscal deficit to 2.5% by the year 2023. But recession, slowdown, global uncertainties and trade wars hit the Indian economy. And now it looks like the path to reduced fiscal deficit is the kind that Matt Damon took on in The Martian. Very rocky. This year, experts say that the fiscal deficit target of 3.3% will not be met by the government, which means there's going to be a deviation. Well, if you're a 90s kid, you remember what deviation could lead up to, like in that serial called Aahat. Danger is the sign you see, and if you're lucky, you might just survive. This is exactly how some ratings agencies consider a deviation from the fiscal glide path. You may well ask, so how does that impact the Indian economy? For one, it determines India's credibility in government-backed securities. Too much jargon? Okay, wait. Imagine the economy as an individual. If your credit score is good, then you get banks and NBFCs pushing you to take loans. If not, then the only option is Vasuli Bhai from Golmaal. And we know how excessive borrowings is injurious to health. But as we said before, Bahi Khata 2 cannot focus on the fiscal roadmap alone. The economy needs revival, it needs growth, and Nirmala will have to do a balancing act that could look something like this. The economy needs development, the economy needs investment, it needs jobs, infrastructure development, but it cannot deviate much from the fiscal prudence roadmap. Of course, like every strapping hero, Nirmala too gets some help, like the good luck that is broken in times of absolute necessity. In this case, the government will have to use its good luck, the dividends of the RBI, to help its cause. But what if that too isn't enough? What are the other options our hero has? Now, when you don't have money, the first thing you do is sell stuff that you don't need. For the government, that's divestment. Yes, kuch paane ke liye kuch khona padta hai. Remember that line from the film Bazigar? But now the question is, will Nirmala emerge as the Bazigar after the release of Bahi Khata 2? Will she rise and conquer over her Thanos? That's the question we're asking.
Well, if you're looking for clarity, it's not going to come at intermission time. This brings us to the make or break point in the film Bahi Khata 2. And like all cliffhangers, our midpoint is us scratching our heads, thinking what next? What will Nirmala do? Aage kya hoga? Fisk फंसाएगा या बचाएगा? Picture अभी बाकी है मेरे दोस्त. देखते रहिए. लौटेंगे हम ब्रेक के बाद. Back from intermission, we hope you've done a refill of your popcorn tub. But meanwhile, Bahi Khata 2 all set for this weekend release. Typically, it has a blockbuster opening, and because there's always so much at stake, our filmy reporters, some call them the paparazzi if you wish, they're out and about. They're getting us the big scoops, the buzz, behind the scenes to find out ki kahani kis taraf aage mudegi. Of course, for films, doing away with the entertainment tax means that the returns at the box office, they are for keeps. As far as producers are concerned, they don't have to share a chunk of the collections with the government. But in this case, in Bahi Khata 2, the question is, can the tax on dividend distribution make an exit? And thus, it could make the way for capital markets to become that much more attractive to investors. Nayantara, my colleague, has been getting us snapshots of what's brewing on that front, and she's joining us. Nayantara, tell us, what are you hearing? What are the chances that we'll actually say goodbye to DDT? Clearly, it's one of the side villains in this piece. Tell us what we can expect. If DDT actually goes, the question is if Nirmala is going to beat up this villain hollow, like any true 90s film hero. Is there going to be a dishum? That's what we are looking forward to in the script. But tell us what you're hearing.
नहीं, इतना टैक्स देती थी, देती हूँ और देती रहूंगी, बट इतना टैक्स, निर्मला मैम भीख मांगती हूँ, पेट पड़ जाऊंगी, टैक्स कम कर दो. मैं तो ना कह रही हूँ, मार्केट के लोग कह रहे हैं. Let me tell you what the market is expecting and something ET now has also learned from top level government sources. कुछ ना कुछ पैकेज आ सकता है कैपिटल मार्केट्स के लिए. Trading at lifetime high should try and revive investment. So what we are understanding from our sources is that the Prime Minister's office has also been involved to figure out what should be done with the dividend distribution tax. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has also in Parliament called it regressive. Will it be abolished is of course the multi-billion-dollar question. Markets would want nothing more. Some tweak. Is it fair to levy it along with other kinds of taxation? Is DDT also the third time that it is charged, which impacts shareholders? But not just DDT, even long-term capital gains tax. Highly unpopular, but that's not the point. Ideas to revive sentiment also. And the pros and cons have been discussed between the Finance Ministry as well as the Prime Minister's office. Of course, those who are opposing the long-term capital gains tax say, can the central exchequer afford to let the revenue go? Let's see how that one goes. But one thing is clear, if DDT is tweaked or abolished and long-term capital gains tax is redefined with a longer holding period, markets should do very well.
Sure, but you know, like any film, no matter how much it's off that beaten track, it's always going to have to innovate a little bit more. It has to come up with ideas to make the box office tinkle with these big collections, because the audience, they always want something hatke. Now, Nayanthara has heard, again through her khufia sources, who are also working on this film called Bahi Khata 2, that there may be a new border tax. Not border, which had, of course, Sunny Paji, which is a movie we all remember from every Republic, every Independence Day. It's not that border. We're talking about an all-new border adjustment tax. So what's that all about? You know, Nayanthara, this is like introducing a new character in a film, the entry of a new tax. If you can tell us how this tax could match, if not Hollywood practices, but at least general global practices. Is there some amount of plagiarism that's happening over there? Or do you think this is unique to the script of Bahi Khata 2?
संदेश से आते हैं, हमें तड़पाते हैं, हम टैक्स की चिट्ठी लिखते रहते हैं, पूछते जाते हैं, कब भरोगे टैक्स, कब भरोगे टैक्स? आ गया एक border adjustment tax. That's right, we at ET now exclusively understand that come 1st of February, Nirmala Sitharaman, the Finance Minister, could announce a border adjustment tax. Like the name suggests, it will create a level playing field between the domestic industry and those importing goods to the country. There are several instances and several complaints by industry, domestic industry that is, they're at a disadvantage. They're not able to offset several tax levies as well as duties. But is this going to be WTO compliant? Could this be seen as a case of India increasing its tariffs? Sources in the Commerce Ministry and Finance Ministry differ and say absolutely not. The border adjustment tax is indeed tax compliant, WTO compliant. Several other countries already follow it, and it should provide a big booster shot to manufacturing.
Okay, Nayanthara, that's the buzz that we were looking for. But of course, now we've all heard कि कुछ पाने के लिए कुछ खोना पड़ता है. It's pedantic, I know. It's cliched. Hisapita dialogue hai ye, but we all know what happened to Raj Kapoor after Mera Naam Joker. He went bankrupt. And this despite the fact that later on in life, that movie turned into a classic. But that's for much later in hindsight. But as far as bankruptcy goes, as far as depleting coffers go, the government is looking at a lot of PSUs, and they want to lose control over them so that the coffers can be repleted. They can be refilled. In this sequel, of course, now the question is, are we expecting Bahi Khata 2 to do more of that divestment? Because it could be the highest ever. It's what we're hearing from our reporter, Ruchi. Ruchi, the future sequels of Bahi Khata, as we know it, also depend on how much this production hopes to make through that divestment route. Tell us what you're hearing about it.
As Sunny Deol said, Tariq pe Tariq, Tariq pe Tariq, Tariq pe Tariq, but still BPCL, Shipping Corp and Concor could not be divested this year, which means most of these companies will have to be divested only next year, Vikram. After all, the government has it all. मेरे पास invested interest है, profitable companies है, and assets भी है. तुम्हारे पास क्या है? Only the massive 1.05 lakh crore rupee target. In fact, despite that, the government has put out the expression of interest for the Udan Khatola Air India as well. The money will be coming in only much later. The idea, of course, is to have a clean deal on the table, mop up as much funds as you can. And with so much that is lined up for next year, expect Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman to show me the money. Deepam could be given the highest ever disinvestment target of close to 1.5 lakh crore rupees in the upcoming budget.
That big divestment, it's the big shastra that Nirmala has to fight the many villains she has to fight. But the big twist in this film called Bahi Khata 2 has to be the biggest weapon that Nirmala can use to tame the Thanos of all problems that we introduced, and that is fiscal deficit. How do you handle this little devil that could be the real catalyst in the plot? Ruchi, my colleague, has some exclusive information on how this plot could get twisted with the fiscal slippage. If you can tell us, Ruchi, how will the Fisc make this production a make-or-break one for its protagonist and its director, Nirmala Sitharaman?
Very well put, Vikram. The Thanos of all problems is the fiscal deficit. What to do when the Titanic of growth is already sinking to the lowest level that we've seen in many, many years. The government's spending ability is restricted and private investment is suffering from a hangover of stretched balance sheets and overcapacity. No wonder then the government will have to continue to fire up the growth cylinders. It will be the return of the FRBM fiscal roadmap that the government may look at in this budget. We're talking about a revised roadmap where the government may look at not just tweaking this year's fiscal target, but also setting out new targets for the next year. Director Nirmala Sitharaman will have to walk the tightrope on the fiscal situation. Boosting non-tax revenues and tax revenues is the best option to contain this massive fiscal hole. But both are unlikely to pan out in any meaningful way, which could mean and could result into this production getting bumped at the budget box office. The guest appearance of the corporate tax cuts have also changed the tracks significantly. The real impact could be felt only much later. Could Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman give into the public demand of a personal income tax cut is something that everyone will be watching out for.
Thanks for that, Ruchi. Now, like we've said ahead of the release of the film, and this could be a big spoiler for you, so apologies for it, the Fisc and its treatment at the hands of the writer, the director and the actor of this production, it could really determine how this film does at the box office. And speaking of which, the question to ask is this film eventually going to be a dud or a big money churner? One way to assess it is to look at box office returns of past productions of prequels to the Bahi Khata franchise. Our collections, of course, come from the falls and the rises that we've seen in the equity markets on budget day. At the 2015 budget prequel release, we've seen a rise of about 0.5% at the box office Sensex. 2016, of course, there was a fall, and it wasn't too much, about 0.6%. 2017 was the highest returns we've seen in recent times. This is a rise of 1.75% on the box office Sensex. Of course, not too large, but still large by relative standards. And that was followed by a marginal decline in collections on the 2018 Bahi Khata prequel release date. But now for Bahi Khata 1, again the one that was directed by Nirmala Sitharaman in her brand new role as Finance Minister, the collections had taken a knock. Not too much again, about a percentage point. So what will it be this time? Will the collections rise or fall? Will the critics lap up or lump this latest offering of the Government of India? And will we, the audiences, people like you and me, who will be watching this film as it plays out on the release date this Saturday, here on ET Now, will we give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down? So much at stake, so much to aspire for. I'm Vikram Oza. Catch Bahi Khata 2 on Saturday at 7 o'clock in the evening for the real deal on this very channel, complete with a filmy tadka. Thanks for joining us. Happy viewing.